Hello, everyone. This is Ira. I'm happy to give a quick demo today of the FuzzyIO tool that we've built to help you build fuzzy masses of a real estate development. I've already started here by building a little town. You could probably do much better than I did, but I mocked something up just to show you the kind of extent and range of buildings you might be able to build using this tool. But I think it'd be good to start from scratch. So let's go into the launch point of the tool that you'll probably see when you first use it and work from there to build a basic building and get you introduced to all the features. So you might see a page like this when we give you the tool. This is the kind of landing page for the simulator, and you'll actually click this link to open the tool, but for now I just wanted to introduce you to some core concepts that the model uses so that you might intuit or understand kind of what's going on as you're building. So the fundamental unit of this model is something called a voxel, and it's sort of a 3D pixel, and it is a cube, kind of like you see here, and it exists in an array of other cubes, and it's usually restricted, and well, actually it's always restricted to this sort of grid so that you can, in a way, sketch out a building using these cubes. And if you've ever played Minecraft or something like that, you kind of get the idea that you can, without getting into architectural detail, approximate the total volume of a building as a sort of a shape or a cloud of these voxels. All right, I think that's enough background. Let's start building some stuff so you can see what we're doing. When you enter the tool for the first time, you're going to see a landing page that looks like this. The default address is what you want to have here, so keep it. It's important, though, to enter a username that's your last name or some other unique alphanumeric character, because if you just leave the username as guessed, it won't let you save and load files. So I'm going to use my last name here, Winder, and connect. When you first enter the tool, you're going to see this kind of ground plane of grid squares, and you can navigate this using a 3-button mouse. So if you have a 3-button mouse, right click, left click, and a mouse wheel, I recommend using that. You can get away with a 2-button mouse too, but it might be a little more awkward. So if you press down and hold the middle mouse button, it's going to let you rotate. And if you roll the mouse wheel, it's going to let you zoom in and out. And if you press the right mouse button and hold, it's going to let you pan. So basic 3D navigation functions. And if you ever get lost, like you lost the map, you don't know where you are, you can hit reset camera position and it'll bring you back home. The first thing we might want to do is let's start by building a parcel. I think a lot of your projects will begin with building parcels. So to build a parcel, I hit configure, and I have to add a parcel. And now it says parcel 1, so I'm going to name this my A parcel. I'm going to configure that, and this parcel has all these settings, but I still don't see my parcel yet. That's because I haven't drawn the polygon that the parcel is based on. So why don't I do that first? So configure vertices and add vertex. So now I have this hovering sphere that shows me if I click where a point in that polygon will be, and if I add at least 3, all of a sudden I now have a voxel array, or a zone of voxels that has started to draw for me. So once you draw these, by the way, if I'm done, you can always add vertex again, and if you add more, it'll just connect these where you left off. If you right click, you deselect and you're done editing, you can also click that button again. If you wanted to delete a point afterward, you can click the X and it's gone. So this parcel kind of shows us some of the basics of what's going on. By default, all parcels are built with a 1 floor of retail that's 10 feet high and 30 feet on a side for the square. So it's quite a big area. If you want to change the grid size, you can actually move a slider. Say, let's, instead of 30, if I wanted 40, now my grid cubes are bigger, but I can fit less of them in this parcel. You can also rotate the whole grid using this interface as well. If you wanted to, say, line up your grid for superficial reasons to the edge of a parcel or something. But remember, this isn't real architecture. It's kind of fuzzy, so maybe it doesn't matter too much to you, the rotation, but it would be maybe superficially aesthetic, or you wanted to suggest some main lines of the site design-wise. So that's the basics of a parcel, but what if we wanted to actually change what's built on it? Well, you want to go to the first volume that's automatically placed here, configure Podium volumes, and you can see Podium volume 1 already exists. If I configure that, you can see that this volume has a setback of 20 feet and it's above ground. So I can actually play with that. So if I made this below ground, I just pop that below ground. And it's maybe easier to see if I hide my base map. So I'm going to uncheck that really quick. But yeah, you can see that I have this mass of building underground now. You can put it above ground for now. That probably makes more sense. If I mess with the setback, you can actually see your building is smaller. So instead of 20, what if it was 80 feet? Now I'm leaving an 80-foot gap between the side of my parcel and any building that's built automatically. But that's sort of changing the shape and plan. But what if I wanted to change the types of voxels I'm drawing? So that's where zones come in. Zones are sort of your basic floor plates, and this works in sort of a pancake model where you're adjusting zones by their use and their number of floors. So this zone here is right now just 1 story of retail, but if I make that 5 stories, now I have 5 stories of retail. Or if I want to change the floor height, it's 10 by default, but you might want a taller floor plate for retail for some reason or some other use. And you can adjust that so in the whole building gets taller accordingly. You can also change the whole function here. So let's say that this was maybe made more sense as a hotel for you. Now you're a hotel. And these are all kind of color coded based on what you're used to in class, I hope. So there you go, it's a hotel. If I add another zone on top of this, it's using the same footprint defined by the Podium volume, and you are just adding on top of that. And just like I did for the hotel volume, I can change this to, I don't know, I can put a office on top of that and extrude the number of floors and change the floor height as well independently. So you're sort of getting the idea how you would create a massing where you divide it up into levels of different function and heights ad infinitum. So what if you wanted to actually not just have a podium that's the same shape of floor all the way up? Well, let me get rid of that office. And instead of adding a zone directly here, I might actually add another podium volume on top of the original one. So you'll note that you can actually have multiple podium volumes on the same parcel. And because each podium volume has its own setback quantity here, you can change that for each podium volume. So this one now has a setback of 120, and I can configure the zones for this and extrude that. So now I have a building that has sort of multiple levels to it and sort of a shape to it. So now this is one way to generate volumes, but another one that is probably going to be something you're interested in, especially at higher densities, is this other type of volume called a tower volume. So to demonstrate that, I'm actually going to build a new parcel. I'm going to call this V parcel, and it's good practice to name your parcels so you don't lose track of them. Just going to add it over here. Just some arbitrary shape. Note that if you draw multiple parcels, if they overlap at all, they're not going to draw correctly. It's so this is just to make sure that you don't start double counting volumes and having them overlap. So just got to make sure that your parcels are all independent. I'm going to get rid of the existing Podium volume. So this really is now just a blank parcel. When I initially build my tower volume, which I'll do right here, add tower, you see this rectangle appeared, but I want to move it and I want to change its size. So I'm going to go to configure tower. Once I hit configure tower, this blue ball shows up. And so these are just, whenever you see a teal sphere, it means it's a control point that you can click on and drag around. So I can drag that onto the site and it's already going to extrude and pop up some zones for me. If you're ever having trouble seeing what you want to see, like a sphere, you can hide the voxels. So I can uncheck that here. So now all I'm seeing are my polygons, just to make it easier to see what I'm doing. Let's just put this tower here. I can change its width. I can change its depth. And just like the Podium volumes, tower volumes also have zones, and I can edit those. So this is residential, 3 stories by default. Instead of 3 stories, maybe I'll make that 20. And the floor height I'll change to, I don't know, 12 feet. And if I turn voxels back on, I have a tower here. So towers are unique in that you can move them around. They're not they need to be on a parcel, but it doesn't matter what parcel they're on. So if I edit my tower volume and I move it over to this parcel, it'll still work. But what it does is it just drops it on top of any existing Podium. And if there's overhangs and things like that, it'll let it happen. So you got to be careful not to draw anything that just is too wacky, doesn't make sense. But maybe if you have an eye for cantilevers, that's fine too. So towers, just like Podiums, you can go in here and configure the zones, add multiple zones so that you can have varying uses and the number of floors for those as well. All right, so there's my crazy tower. Now I'm going to demonstrate one of the last features, and that is the Podium exclusion area. So I think another common typology you might want to make is a building with a courtyard or something like that, and this is what that's going to help you with. So I'm going to go back to editing my parcel B, and I'm going to add my Podium back. So I have this building here, and let's say I wanted to build a residential block that had a courtyard in the middle. And let's say that I didn't want any setback initially either. So the way you might do that is I might hide my voxels initially, but I would go to this Podium exclusion area. And what this is it's another kind of polygon you can draw. So you have your vertices appear, and you can draw a polygon, although this is like drawing negative space in a Podium. So if I show voxels now, essentially any area inside of that Podium exclusion area now is not having any of the pixels drawn. So it's okay if this actually overlaps outside of it. It'll keep track of that independently, and these actually can span other parcels. So I can actually cut off the corner of this hotel using the same exclusion zone. All right, so that's the basics. Now, an important thing that this tool allows you to do is save your scenarios and load them later. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate that. So let's say that I have my beautiful tower here. It's perfect. And I want to save my scenario. So I'll save perfect tower. Now you manually write a name here. Try not to use any crazy characters like no slashes or anything because it might not work. So just use your basic alphabet numbers, maybe underscores, and save it. Boom. So when you save it, it now appears in this list of scenarios you can load. So even if I delete this later, I can retrieve my scenario. So actually I have these other things that I've made in the past. So parcels version 1, if I load that, these are actually the parcels for your studio project potentially that I just put in here to play around. And but if I go back, I'm like, oh wait, but I wanted my perfect tower back. You can load that, and you can also delete your loads as well. So that should hopefully make it so that you're not redrawing the same thing over and over again. I recommend you save often because as much as we're proud of this tool, it is a fairly small team. Actually, it's just one person most of the time developing this, and we did our best to keep the bugs out. But if it ever crashes, you'll be happy if you just periodically save what you're doing. Oh, one important thing I should show you, just to remind you, the default base map is this grid, but in the load base map drop-down menu, we've included this file here. If you select it and hit load, that'll load the particular base map for the site in your class. So that should look familiar, I hope. And you might use this as a template to draw your own configurations. I know I did when I used it to kind of mock up these parcels here and eventually build my own scenario pretty quickly right here. All right, thanks for joining me. Hope you have fun building and good luck.